So I guess we're going to talk about Norman Borlaug and his impact and influence on agriculture.
A little bit.
There?
Okay. So could you introduce yourself to us?
Yes. My name is Judith Pym.
Norman and I shared the same Borlaug great-grandparents. So some people would say that we're second cousins.
Okay, I'm Tom Spindler. I'm with the Norman Borlaug Heritage Foundation.
So, what does Norman Borlaug mean to you?
Norman Borlaug is one of the great inspirations of my life. He is a man who was so selfless and humble and dedicated and hardworking, who cared passionately about alleviating and ending hunger and devoted his whole life to it.
Norman Ernest Borlaug was born on March 25, 1914, in Cresco, Iowa. Up until he was 19, Borlaug worked on his 106-acre family farm, raising grains and cattle, among other things. In 1933, Borlaug went to enroll at the University of Minnesota.
Norman left for the University of Minnesota with only money enough for 5 months of classes. But by struggling and working hard, he was able to continue his education, but it was interrupted from time to time by working.
Borlaug spent his 20s in various different jobs. In 1935, he was involved with the Civilian Conservation Corps, a product of the New Deal offering labor jobs to the unemployed. During his tenure, he was introduced to many malnourished, saying, "I saw how food changed them. All of this left scars on me." Toward the end of his undergraduate education, he attended a lecture by Elvin Charles Stakeman, a professor at the university.
Dr. Stakeman, he moved into history of the rust fungi, other fungi that were dangerous from the standpoint of our cereal crop. And I was fascinated. And I said as I left that room, I want to study under a person like this.
Professor Stakeman is the one that steered him into plant pathology after he had his undergraduate degree in forestry. And Stakeman, very influential in getting Norm to get into the plant pathology area that led him to his work in wheat fields in Mexico that changed everything.
With Stakeman's help, Borlaug was appointed head of Mexico's Cooperative Wheat Research and Production Program. As Mexico was importing much of its grain and seeking self-sufficiency, Borlaug realized a solution: take advantage of the region's 2 growing seasons by growing in 2 different places, the current Central Highlands and the Yaqui Valley up north. However, Borlaug's boss, George Harrar, was against the expansion.
I stood up and I said, we've got to work in all the areas where wheat was an important crop. And if I'm not permitted to do that, I'll leave.
No one was for him for doing that. His bosses were against it. He had to actually work alone for half the year with no money and no car, no vehicle, no support.
Fortunately, Stakeman was able to relieve the situation. By the end of the first double wheat season, production was not only increased, but a larger variety of seeds adapted to various conditions were available.
How do you make a technological advance or development so that wheat becomes more appropriate for a different environment? And one of his strategies was to select for shorter, sort of more robust wheat plants, so they are less likely to blow over, and this results in a better yield.
Using a Japanese dwarf, Borlaug crossbred it with a disease-resistant variety adapted to Mexico's conditions. By 1963, Borlaug's variety represented 95% of Mexico's wheat crops, and harvests were 6 times larger than before. Soon after, Borlaug had moved on to work in India. In 1961, a rare famine struck East India, affecting 700 million people. The cause? a semi-centennial bloom of bamboo flowers, which led to the destruction of many basic crops. The new famine was not helped by India's massive population growth, which was growing faster than ever, with 9 million people added the year before. In 1962, some strains developed by Borlaug found their way to the Indian Agricultural Research Institute. A member of the institute, M.S. Swaminathan, requested for Borlaug, so by next year, Borlaug was heading the Rockefeller Foundation wheat program in New Delhi. In the words of Paul Ehrlich, the battle to feed all of humanity is over. India couldn't possibly feed 200 million more people by 1980. In 1965, despite setbacks from the Mexican authorities, Borlaug was able to transport 450 tons of seed varieties to India and neighboring Pakistan. Despite conflict between India and Pakistan over the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Borlaug's work persevered, and results showed. From 1965 to 1970, wheat yield in Pakistan moved from 4.6 million to 7.3 million tons. India's jumped from 12.3 to 20.1 million. The U.S. government took note, coining the massive agricultural production as the Green Revolution.
From 12 million to something over 90 million, that's just for India. And you can imagine what India would be like if they had not had all that tremendous increase in their staple.
We began these multi-location testing, not just in Mexico and India and Pakistan, but in other 30, 40 locations from Canada to Argentina.
In 1970, Borlaug received the Nobel Peace Prize. The rest of his life was marked with high achievements.
So Norman Borlaug set up the World Food Prize in 1986. One of his goals was to inspire leaders, young leaders, but also to recognize people that had done something valuable in the area of food security. One reason we have the World Food Prize Youth Institutes, that was begun by Norman Borlaug as well. And the purpose there is to get high school students and college students into international internships.
You know, Iowa declared October 16th Norman Borlaug World Food Prize Day. On that day, the governor and the state legislature was holding a big ceremony in the state capitol. And Dr. Borlaug was to be there, and we were getting set to start, and the governor was there, and everyone looked around, and Dr. Borlaug was gone. And so we were running around the Capitol. Where is he? We have to get him back here. And we found him down a hallway with a group of fourth grade students, and he was explaining one of the historical exhibits to them.
I was teaching fourth grade at the time, and part of our fourth grade studies involved, I was the Iowa Studies teacher, and so we would have a unit on famous Iowans, and of course I knew who Norman Borlaug was because I'm from Cresco, or teaching Cresco, which is where he went to school, so we already knew about him. But I didn't really know, you see articles on him and you read these things in the newspaper, but I had no idea of what this man did and how involved he was with changing the world.
So I think that's a legacy, is the education of young people and seeing food security as an overarching theme.
Students, young and old alike, can learn from the example that he set.
One thing that always struck me about Dr. Borlaug right from the very beginning was he was an extremely accomplished person, of course very smart, but he was always immediately available to everyone that he met. Everyone that he met that showed any interest in knowing him, he was interested in them. And I was always very gratified that he took a personal interest in me and everybody, as I said, that I was aware of, that he worked with at the World Food Prize.
There's only, in all the history of the United States of America, only 3 persons to have those 3 awards: the Nobel Peace Prize, Congressional Gold Medal, Presidential Medal of Freedom. One is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The second is Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor. And the third is the farm boy from Howard County in northeast Iowa that few people had heard of.
He was thinking deeply about hunger and how we could really use technological advances to improve outcomes for people around the world. So he put together a lot of things, socially, economics, plant production, and science in a way that really hadn't been put together before.
We're going to have what was called the population bomb. There just would not be enough food for any more people than 3 billion. So today we have 7 billion and more, and they're at least as well fed as the 3 billion were back in the 1960s. And so that's all because of Borlaug's leadership.
He is our state's greatest hero, Iowa's greatest hero. That's not a bad legacy.
That's certainly some food for thought.
Wish I had said that.